Verstappen exposes Red Bull's crisis and makes a shocking prediction for Hamilton and Ferrari. Max Verstappen has thrown cold water on the hopes of Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes fans after making a rather bleak prediction following preseason testing. The three-time world champion did not hold back in his assessment, openly admitting that his team is far from where they want to be. Even more concerning, he warned that only one team seems ready to dominate the 2025 season, and to make matters worse, it's not Red Bull. The Dutchman, who has set the pace in recent years, showed signs of frustration after ruining a set of tires during testing. Now, he sees Red Bull's dominance under serious threat. Worse yet, Verstappen has already declared that winning the Australian Grand Prix will be nearly impossible. McLaren, the real threat? The main problem? McLaren is not only faster, but also has a reliable car with excellent tire wear. This means that Norris and Piastri could be on their way to turning the season into a nightmare for Verstappen and his team. What about Ferrari and Hamilton? As for Ferrari and Hamilton, things do not look promising either. The SF25 showed glimpses of brilliance with Hamilton behind the wheel, but as track temperatures rose, the car became a nightmare to drive. Meanwhile, Mercedes appears destined to play a secondary role, struggling to be the third best team on the grid. In other words, Ferrari fans and Hamilton supporters might have to endure another season of disappointments. Red Bull's advisor Helmut Marko did not mince words. McLaren has a 0.2 per lap advantage, he stated. While that may not seem like much in such a competitive championship, it is practically a sentence of dominance. Verstappen was even more direct, stating that only one team is currently ready to fight for the title. It has a beautiful color, orange. A worrying forecast. If Verstappen's predictions were not troubling enough for Red Bull and Ferrari fans, renowned journalist Ted Kravitz added fuel to the fire. He boldly predicted a podium without Verstappen or any Ferrari drivers. According to Kravitz, McLaren will secure a 1-2 finish, with George Russell as the only rival capable of reaching the podium. Cadillac joins F1, the end of the Andretti dream. It is official. Cadillac has been confirmed as the newest Formula One team starting in 2026. However, this was not just a simple approval, but the final chapter in one of the most intense behind-the-scenes battles in recent F1 history. After a long war between Michael Andretti and Liberty Media, General Motors made a masterstroke, taking over the project and leaving the Andretti name out of the equation. For years, Andretti fought for a place in F1, promising to bring the prestige of his name and the power of General Motors to the grid. But his entry was brutally rejected by Formula One in January 2024, with officials arguing that his team did not add enough value to the championship. This decision sparked outrage and even triggered an investigation by the U.S. Department of Justice against Liberty Media, which was accused of anti-competitive practices. GM's power move. While Andretti tried to pressure the system, General Motors played a more strategic game behind the scenes. By the end of 2024, they delivered a checkmate. Michael Andretti was sidelined, and GM took full control of the project, transforming it into Cadillac F1 team. Without Andretti, Liberty Media's resistance crumbled, and the entry was finally approved. In short, F1 never wanted Andretti, but they could not say no to General Motors' technological and financial power. Despite its triumphant entry, Cadillac will not arrive as a factory team in its first years. Instead, the brand will compete with Ferrari engines, a brutal irony for an American manufacturer that has always prided itself on its independent DNA. This temporary partnership suggests that Cadillac still needs time to build its own infrastructure before truly challenging F1's top teams. However, GM has already set its sights on the future. The company has launched GM Performance Power Units LLC, aiming to develop its own power unit by 2030. But a significant challenge remains. Developing a competitive engine requires time and billions of dollars. Can GM catch up to Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull in just a few years? Or will Cadillac end up as another midfield team with no real impact? Political and diplomatic fallout. The rejection of Andretti's entry caused a diplomatic crisis behind the scenes. the US government became directly involved, with Congress members pressuring Liberty Media and suggesting that the refusal of Andretti's team was motivated by European protectionism. Now that Cadillac has been confirmed, the narrative has shifted. Was it really a sporting decision, or did General Motors simply bypass Andretti to secure a spot in a way that was more acceptable to F1's leadership? Red Bull's hypocrisy, accusing rivals of flexible wings. Red Bull, a team that has mastered the art of exploiting loopholes in F1's regulations, has now taken on the role of the sports enforcer. According to a bombshell report from F1's technical analysts, Red Bull has submitted an official complaint to the FIA against McLaren and Ferrari, accusing them of using flexible wings. Yes, the same Red Bull that once experimented with flexible wings is now lecturing others about legality. Red Bull is particularly concerned about the alleged flexibility of McLaren and Ferrari's front and rear wings, especially after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, where Oscar Piastri won with a car that appeared to gain a mini DRS effect due to its rear wing movement. Red Bull's technical director, Pierre Wache, has already prompted the FIA to take action. Inspectors will be sent to McLaren's headquarters in Woking and Ferrari's base in Maranello to analyze their aerodynamic solutions. But let's be honest. If there is one team that knows about flexible wings, it is Red Bull. Who could forget 2021, when Red Bull was accused of using a rear wing that flexed more than a gymnast? At the time, when Mercedes complained, Red Bull defended itself by calling it innovative engineering. Now that McLaren and Ferrari seem to have found a regulatory loophole, suddenly it has become a scandal. The hypocrisy became even more evident when Pierre Wache made a bold statement. When you see McLaren's rear wing, sorry, but this is more than just a gray area. Curious, isn't it? When Red Bull used flexible components, it was brilliant engineering, but when their rivals do the same, it's suddenly a catastrophe for the sport. It sounds a lot like that neighbor who throws loud parties every weekend, but calls the police when someone else plays music. FIA responds with stricter tests. The FIA has already announced stricter tests to curb possible irregularities. Cameras will be installed to monitor the flexibility of front and rear wings. More rigorous deflection tests on rear wings are already in place, while new tests for front wings will begin at the Spanish Grand Prix. Meanwhile, McLaren seems unbothered by the accusations. Team principal Andrea Stella dismissed Red Bull's claims, stating that the new inspections are no big deal and that McLaren will not need to make any major changes. Translation? Investigate all you want. There's nothing to change here. If Red Bull genuinely believed that McLaren and Ferrari were abusing flexible wings, it was obvious they would file a complaint. But the irony is impossible to ignore. For years, Christian Horner's team has pushed the limits of the regulations. Now that their rivals appear to have done the same, they have suddenly become the F1 rule enforcers.